Hi everyone. So we're going to read chapter 5 in the story of Hachiko Waits. The next morning, Yasuo and his mother arrived at the train station a little before 9 o'clock. The day was unusually warm and humid. It felt more like July than May. The air on the platform was heavy and still, and Mrs. Takashi untucked a white silk fan decorated with pink flowers from her obi and waved it lightly in front of her face. "Where are the professor and Hachi?" Yasuo asked his mother. "I do not know," she said, searching the platform for Mrs. Takashi's platform. Mrs. Takashi's eyes swept over a sea of colorful kimonos in search of the professor's dark brown business suit. "Maybe the professor is away, or maybe he is ill." Mrs. Takashi looked around once more. "I am sure he will be here tomorrow. Come, Yasuo, here is the train." That afternoon, Professor Uno was not on the train that Yasuo and his mother rode back to Shibuya Station, and he was not on the platform when they stepped off the train. But Hachi was there, sitting in his usual spot, alert and waiting. "This is most unusual. Now I am worried," said Yasuo's mother. "Let us wait for the next train." Mrs. Takashi and Yasuo walked over to a wooden bench and sat down. It wasn't long before the next train pulled into the station and discharged its passengers. Yasuo and Mrs. Takashi watched as a crowd of people hurried by. A woman carrying a furoshiki and leading a small child by the hand. High school boys in their navy blue school uniforms with gold buttons, marching up the front of their jackets, and young girls with full serge skirts tied over their bright kimonos. Hachi sat there. He was sniffing the air, his eyes scanning the faces of many people around him. Yasuo and his mother searched the crowd as well, but they did not see the professor. They sat on the bench, while two more trains pulled into the station. Many people departed from the trains and hurried past Hachi to get out of the station, but Professor Ono was not one of them. "Come, Yasuo," Mrs. Takashi stood up. "Let us speak to the station master. Perhaps he knows something." Yasuo's mother bowed to Mr. Yoshikawa. "We are curious about Professor Uno," she said. "He was not on the train today." "A terrible thing has happened." Mr. Yoshikawa removed his hat and spoke in a hushed voice. Professor Uno took ill while he was at the university yesterday. His heart stopped beating. Another professor who works with him came to my office and told me. Yasuo's mother knelt down and took her son's hand. "Yasuo, the professor has died," she said in a small, gentle voice. "But why?" Yasuo asked. "He was not old." "No one knows why it happened," said the station master. "We will never see the professor again," Yasuo whispered, as he stood quietly beside his mother. His chin trembled, his eyes grew moist. He would miss seeing Professor Uno every day. And what would become of Hachi? Yasuo turned to the dog waiting patiently on the platform amid a steady stream of commuters. Tears spilled down Yasuo's cheeks. "But what about—" Yasuo's words caught in his throat. "I do not know what to do," said Mr. Yoshikawa, looking at the dog. "Hachi arrived just before 3 o'clock, as he always does. He does not know his master will never return." An idea took shape in Yasuo's mind. "Okasan," he said, looking up at his mother, "may we take Hachi home with us, please?" "I am sure he will not be any trouble," the station master said. "He is very smart and very well behaved. I have never heard him growl, and until yesterday I had never heard him bark." "I must think about it," said Mrs. Takashi. She looked over at Hachi as he sat perfectly still among the mass of people swirling around him. And just at that moment, he glanced over his shoulder and looked at her. Then his somber gaze returned to the train tracks. "Please, Oka-san," Yuso said. "I will take good care of him, I promise." Yuso held his breath as his mother thought. "I will do it for the professor," she said at last. "He was a very kind man." "Arigato, Oka-san," Yuso said, with a bow. Then he went over to the doorway. "Here, Hachi," he called, slapping his thighs. But the dog did not move. Yuso ran out onto the platform. "You are coming home with Oka-san and me," he told the Akita-ken. Hachi stared up at Yuso, but at the sound of an approaching train he fixed his eyes upon the tracks. Yuso stepped up right beside him and then began walking away. "Hachi, heel!" Yuso spoke at the stern voice he had heard the professor use when giving the dog a command. "Hachi, heel!" he said again. But Hachi would not obey him. "I will get you something to lead him with," said Mr. Yoshikawa. He disappeared into his office for a minute and then returned with a long piece of rope. He tied one end around Hachi's neck and handed the other end to the Yusao. "Come, Hachi," Yuso said. "We are going home." He pulled at the rope, but Hachi would not budge. "He is stronger than I am. Oka-san, you must help me." Yuso and his mother tugged on the rope. Hachi stood his ground. The station master gave him a hand, and at last, with great reluctance, Hachi began to move. "He is not happy," Yuso said, as they led Hachi out of the station and down the steps. "He will get used to us," Yuso's mother said, as they half pulled, half dragged Hachi away. We'll see what happens next in Chapter 6. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.